Look, you ever have one of those weeks where you think the universe is testing your patience, then realize it's not the universe at all, it's just your neighbor named Karen with an HOA rulebook and a superiority complex? Yeah, that was my week. Except this time, she messed with the wrong rancher. Because I also happen to be the county surveyor, the guy who signs off on her property lines. The morning it happened, the air was golden with dust and sunlight. That kind of quiet only country folk understand. My ranch stretched across 30 acres of rolling land, just beyond the reach of town. Horses grazed near the oak line, and I could hear the creek babbling past the fence posts my father hammered in 40 years ago. Every inch of that land carried a memory, sweat, laughter, and the kind of hard work that makes your bones ache but your heart full. Then the rumbling came. Not thunder, worse. Construction trucks. I stepped out on the porch, coffee in hand, watching a convoy of bright yellow trucks roll down the gravel road like an invading army. And leading the charge? A silver SUV with a vanity plate that read RULEZ4U. Karen. She was new to the area, having moved into the subdivision next door, the one built on what used to be pasture land. She'd been on the HOA board exactly 3 weeks before she started sending notices to everyone within shouting distance. My first one said, "Your livestock enclosure appears visible from community walking trail. Please relocate or screen from view." I laughed when I got it. My ranch wasn't even part of their HOA, but apparently Karen didn't get that memo. That morning I watched as her contractors unloaded steel fencing right on the property line. Actually past the line. I knew every boundary post like the back of my hand, and these guys were already digging holes on my side of the land. I walked down the hill, heart thumping, calm but ready for a fight. "Morning," I called out to the foreman. "You got a permit for that?" He looked at his clipboard, squinting. "We're just following the HOA's boundary specs, sir." I raised an eyebrow. "HOA? This is county land, friend. There's no HOA out here." Before he could respond, the SUV door slammed and out marched Karen herself. Blonde hair tucked under a wide-brimmed sun hat, clipboard in one hand, phone in the other, that look of entitlement sharper than a cactus spine. "Excuse me," she barked. "This area falls within the community buffer zone. It's clearly outlined in the master plan." I stared at her. "Karen, that buffer zone is my pasture." She huffed, waving a paper at me. "Not according to the documents I filed. You'll need to move your fence back 50 feet. It's unsightly." Unsightly. The word hit me like a slap. That fence had been there since my dad built it with his own hands. I took a slow breath, my jaw tightening. "You sure about that, Karen?" "Absolutely," she said, smiling smugly. "We're just improving the view for everyone." "Everyone," I repeated softly, "except the man who owns the land." She didn't even flinch. "You'll thank me later." By noon, half the fence posts were in. I tried reasoning, but she kept talking about community standards and aesthetics and property values. The arrogance was thicker than the summer heat. When I called the county office to file a complaint, the clerk chuckled. "Wait, you said she's fencing over your line?" "Yep. Then you might want to have a little talk with the surveyor." "Oh," I said, smiling for the first time that day. "Don't worry, I plan to. Because the truth was, I was the county surveyor. I was the one who'd signed off on every subdivision plat, every property boundary, every legally binding line in this county. And Karen's master plan? It was pending my final approval. That night, as the sun sank behind the hills, I sat on my porch, looking at that ugly new fence cutting across my view. I thought about my father's voice. Calm, patient, don't fight dirty, son. Just fight smart. So that's what I decided to do. I'd fight smart. And by the time I was done, that fence wouldn't just come down. Karen would have to answer for every nail in it. Because sometimes justice doesn't come from anger or revenge. Sometimes it comes from knowing the rules better than the person who tries to weaponize them against you. And Karen was about to learn that the hard way. By the next morning, I had a plan brewing stronger than the coffee in my thermos. The first rays of dawn were cutting through the fog as I loaded my old truck with my surveying gear. Tripods, GPS, marker flags, the whole kit. The sound of my boots crunching against the gravel echoed like a countdown to justice. When I got to the property line, Karen was already there, standing proud behind her gleaming new fence like a queen surveying her conquered territory. The foreman was packing up the last of his tools. They had finished the entire stretch overnight. A brand new silver fence slicing straight through my land, through my pasture, my history. She spotted me and smirked. "Oh, good morning, neighbor. I trust you've accepted the improvements? It really enhances the visual appeal of both our properties." I looked at her, deadpan. "Karen, you built this fence 15 feet into my land." She crossed her arms, her manicured nails glinting in the light. "That's impossible. The HOA blueprints are accurate." "Those blueprints are pending approval," I said quietly. Her smirk faltered. "Pending?" "Yeah," I said, setting down my tripod. "See, the county surveyor has to certify them first." Her eyebrows arched, curiosity mixing with irritation. "And who might that be?" I looked up at her, leveling my sight across the instrument. "You're looking at him." For a moment, silence. The wind tugged at her hat, and the horses in the pasture snorted as if they sensed the shift in power. "You're joking," she said, but her voice had lost its edge. "Nope," I replied, taking my first measurement. "I'm the one who makes those lines official. And according to my records, the actual legal records, this fence is sitting on private property that doesn't belong to your HOA." Her face flushed red. "There must be some mistake." "There is," I said, tightening a bolt on my tripod. "Yours." She turned sharply to the foreman, snapping, "Stop working! Don't touch another thing until I figure this out." He nodded quickly, grateful for an excuse to leave the tension thick in the air. I kept my voice even, calm, but there was something steely in it now. "You've got 72 hours to remove that fence, or the county will file an encroachment order. That means fines, big ones." Karen opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. Her eyes darted toward her phone, but I could tell the bravado was cracking. I'll have to consult with the HOA board," she stammered. "Do that," I said, packing my gear back into the truck. "And while you're at it, tell them they'll need updated plats drawn by someone who actually understands where the property lines are." As I drove off, I could see her shrinking in my rearview mirror, standing alone beside that gleaming fence that already looked more like a mistake than a monument. The next few days were quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that sits heavy before a storm. I spent the time tending to my horses, fixing up the barn and waiting. I knew Karen wouldn't let it go easily. People like her rarely did. Sure enough, on the third day, I got a call from the county office. "Mr. Dalton," the clerk said, "we've received a formal complaint from the Willow Ridge HOA. They're claiming you're interfering with community property." I chuckled softly. "Let me guess, Karen filed it?" "That's the one," he replied, clearly amused. "Don't worry, though. We reviewed the plats you submitted. You're in the clear. In fact, the HOA just got an official notice. Their entire boundary map needs recertification due to inaccuracies." I thanked him and hung up, smiling to myself. It wasn't revenge I felt. It was something better. Vindication. By the next morning, the trucks were back. But this time they weren't building. They were dismantling. Karen stood a few yards away, arms folded tight, her jaw clenched as the workers pulled up the very fence she'd been so proud of. When she saw me approach, she sighed, exhausted. "I suppose you're enjoying this," she muttered. I shook my head. "Not really. I'd rather be mending fences than tearing them down." She glanced at me, confusion flickering in her eyes. "You mean that literally or—" "Both," I said, softening my tone. "You know, Karen, this land's been in my family for generations. My dad taught me every boundary, every stream, every post. We didn't just build fences to keep people out. We built them to remind ourselves where we stood, what we cared for. You tried to change that without ever asking. That's not community, that's control." Her shoulders slumped. "I thought I was helping." she admitted quietly. In the HOA, we always talk about improving property values. I didn't realize I was... She paused, searching for the right word. Erasing someone's history. I nodded. Maybe next time, start by asking instead of ordering. For the first time since she'd arrived, she smiled, not the smug, polished kind, but a small, human one. You're right, she said. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry. Apology accepted, I said, but let's make it official. Once that fence is gone, I'll help you mark the correct line. No charge. Call it a truce. Her eyes widened. You do that after all this? Karen, I said, tipping my hat, I'm not the enemy. I just want peace on my side of the fence and yours. By sunset, the fence was down, replaced by simple wooden markers that gleamed in the fading light. Karen brought over a bottle of sweet tea as a gesture of goodwill, and for the first time we talked like neighbors, not rivals. As the stars began to dot the sky, I thought about how easily pride can build walls, and how much strength it takes to tear them down. In the end, it wasn't about fences or property lines. It was about respect. Because when you draw a line in the land, it's not just about ownership. It's about understanding where one person's story ends and another's begins. And sometimes, if you're lucky, those stories can still meet in the middle. Moral. Sometimes the strongest boundaries are the ones built on respect, not rules. And the best way to win a fight isn't to draw a line. It's to understand what's worth standing on.